So here we are, ready to make our very first visualization in Tableau, which is really exciting. And here we are with our Tableau window, a program that we are going to spend a lot of time with. that I have spent a lot of time with in the past tense. And things that I've really come to appreciate. Like I really appreciate this program and how well they've dealt with some really difficult problems. And at first, I have to be honest, I was not sold. Gotta be honest, I was not. I was not a Tableau fan. And the more time I spent with it over the years, the more I understood why they made the design decisions they did, and the more I respect the product that they put together. I think it's really powerful. And I'm excited to start. Like, this is the first step in a very long journey. So let's get started. So the first always the first thing that we have to do in Tableau is actually get data in there. Now, Tableau does a couple things. It comes preloaded with some saved data sources. We're going to ignore these, even though we're going to be using a flavor of this world indicators, only because there's no guarantee that they'll keep these from version to version, from release to release. And I don't want to build a curriculum around things that can change like that. So we're going to be using our own file. But notice that even then, you can have a lot of different things. Like all of these common files, in addition to a whole bunch of other things. Like you can see all of the other file types that are allowed, and then in addition to that, you can connect to live services like a SQL Server, Redshift, all of these other things, and I mean tons. Now here's the thing: this is not surprising, because programs like Tableau live and breathe and live and die rather by their ability to integrate with other IT solutions that customers already have. Things like Salesforce, like you just saw here. You want to do a Salesforce dashboard? We connect to Salesforce. Where did it go? Right there. You want to do Databricks? Nope, we connect to Databricks. Whatever it is, we'll connect to it, because that's how Tableau gets used, is by making it easy for you to get your data in there. For this particular course, we're only going to be dealing with kind of static files, and we'll talk more about like why that is, but it's a design decision on my part, not necessarily how people would use it in practice. So for our purposes today, we're going to start with just a text file, and the text file is going to be worldhealth.csv. So this is a flavor of the world indicators dataset that comes prepackaged, but even since I've been teaching Tableau, this world indicators dataset has changed a little bit. So this world health is just one flavor of that. So let's go ahead and say open. We always get taken to this next field here. We're not going to deal with this part up here right now in this particular lesson. We'll spend a whole week talking about what the heck this thing is and how we deal with it and what all that is. The point I want to talk about right now is this bit down here. So again, this is our sheet or our frame. We see our columns, which are our variables, and we see our values, our data actually in here. And then I want to draw your attention to one subpart of the thing I was drawing your attention to earlier, which is this little symbol up here, the little hashtag, the number sign. This is a numeric variable. This symbol right here, the little calendar, is a date variable. This thing here, the ABC, indicates a categorical variable, string, meaning just a string of characters. And then the little globe, meaning that Tableau has automatically identified this thing as a geophysical variable, which we'll talk about in quite a bit of detail in one of the weeks of the course. Regardless, for right now, like we will spend a lot of time talking about how to spice this bit of the tool flow up. But for right now, we're just going to go to sheet 1 and get started. So all of our variables are here on the left. So and they're divided into two camps. The top are the ones in blue here. These are our categorical variables. In Tableau, they're called dimensions. And in the bottom here, we have these green variables. In Tableau, they're called measures. So dimensions are categorical, measures are numeric. I have to confess right now that I know I will slip back into talking about categorical and numerical, because it's I'm ingrained of thinking about it that way. But I'll try to at least sometimes connect things back between measures, numeric variables, and dimensions, categorical variables. Let's do a quick tour while we're here as well. We have these are called shelves. We have the columns, which is what's going to go on our horizontal axis. We have the row shelf, which is our variable that's going to go on our vertical axis, the rows here. We have, I call this our canvas. It's where we're going to be dropping our stuff. And then we have these things up here that are called cards. So we have the pages card, we'll talk about what that is, the filters card, and the marks card. So let's start by doing some stuff here. So what are we going to do? Let's start by dragging in the variables that Hans has done for us. So, and we may not have exact equivalents, but let's start. So we have female life expectancy. I'm going to put that as my, let's do my rows. That's okay. Okay, and notice that when I did that, I just dragged it over. A couple things have happened. I automatically have a visualization. That's kind of interesting. It automatically made it as a bar chart, which we'll talk about. And notice that the values here are on my rows. So if we're thinking about this as table, I have the life expectancy variable is displayed as the rows here. But let's also do GDP. Let's drag this over here. Okay, so this is interesting. So now I've gone from a bar chart to a scatter plot, except my scatter plot only has one dot. And the question is, what does this dot represent? So right now, this dot represents the sum of the GDP, of all the GDP in the entire data set, and the sum of the life expectancy in the entire data set. That's not quite what we want. We want one dot per country. And so how do we do that? We need to start introducing some of these other things. So notice that we've denoted GDP and life expectancy by position, but we're going to start bringing in some of these other pieces of information, some of these other design elements in order to make a more compelling visualization. So one thing that we can do here is by dragging a country/region to detail. So I'm just going to drag this over here to detail. And notice what I get. So now I have something completely different. I have, for instance, this dot is China. This dot is Japan. This dot is United States. So I have 1 point per country. So that's interesting. Hans also did something else. He had these things colored by region. Now, when I drag this over here, I'm going to take region, I'm going to drag it over to color. Notice that it automatically assigns a color, one to Africa, one to Asia, one to Europe, Middle East, and so on and so on. And we're good to go. So we can actually start to see what's going on here. And what else? So we have both of our positions. We have detail and we have color. What other design elements did Hans use? He also had population as size. So I'm going to take population and drag that to my size. Again, notice I get a new card over here explaining the population's size and how that relates to the stuff over here. Notice that my tooltip also changes. So I have population total as part of my tooltip now. And what else? So now I think we have all our design elements in except for maybe one, which is that he animated this thing, right? And to animate, we actually drag year to pages. So now notice I have a new card over here. I have one. I can actually advance this thing forward and backward in time by going through my pages. So this is pretty useful. This is pretty useful. The only thing that's missing here is that it doesn't look like what we saw. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, okay, this is fine, but it doesn't look like what Hans showed us. And you're right, it doesn't look like it. And the reason it doesn't look like it is because this axis down here is still weird. He was actually showing things on a logarithmic axis, not a linear axis. So to change that, and to change anything about an axis properties, we right-click it, say Edit Axis, and you can do a bunch of things. You can say, I actually want this to be a fixed axis, and I'll tell you what it's going to be. You can reverse it left-right, and that does occur sometimes. You need to do that. Or you can actually say logarithmic. And when we do that, notice what happens. The kind of clear trend that Hans was telling us about is now readily apparent. Like there's much more of kind of a linear trend when this axis is displayed in a logarithmic form rather than linear form. Now, we can do the same thing. For instance, like some of these dots are pretty hard to see. So you might want to say edit sizes, and you might want to like just crank this thing up and make it more more legible. That's okay. Now, obviously, things start to go on top of each other. That's all right. If you had reasons to edit the colors, you could totally do this. Or you could set a different color palette if you wanted, or whatever you wanted to do. You can change a whole bunch of different stuff. It turns out that these aesthetics, while they're super important, are not often the most important parts. The most important parts are what actual plot we're going to be using here. That's one thing. And then how do we deal with, like, we've kind of ignored this sum up here, and that turns out to be super complicated and important. So there's all sorts of details, and calling them details doesn't really do them justice. There are all sorts of critically important major concepts lying just under the surface of Tableau. And if I have one criticism of this as a platform, it's that it's so darn easy to make a figure that looks like this. Like, we recreated Hans's figure, Hans's visualization, and I don't know, it's been 11 minutes, and that's with a lot of me just talking. And that's great. But there's a problem here too, which is that Tableau is hiding so much stuff from us. And it turns out all of that's really, really important. So we have a lot of work to do. I know it may seem like Tableau is nice and easy and drag and drop, and yes, it does a lot of things really, really well and really, really straightforwardly. But I don't want to give you the impression right now that Tableau is easy. Tableau is really hard, and we have a lot of work to do. But at the end of it, we're going to have so much control and so much power with this platform that I'm really, really excited to use this first visualization where we're just recreating what Hans Rosling did as a jumping off point to some really, really cool material coming up. So stay tuned for all of that in future weeks.